web costs 50 cents. So when they're looking at the numbers, the business folks are going, I can give you money to do this, or I can, continue to do this. The difference was so incredible. The web infrastructure to do this was probably not even a tenth of the cost that they would have paid, to do it via a traditional method. The corporate identity integration was a requirement. They made a stand on enterprise identities. They gave it out in their packet. They basically said, here's your enterprise identity. When you go into this portal, change your password, and going forward, not only will we use this for benefits, but we will use it for access to everything, including changing all your attributes. So they took it very seriously, and they tied it to the HR response, because what's the one thing that everybody pays attention to every year? If you're in a business or in government, you pay attention to open season, because you have to change your benefits. You have to make sure that you're in the right program. The pins were terribly difficult to remember. They were emailing pins out every year, and every year people would forget them. So about 30 to 40% of the people that had pins would have to call up and get new ones. And then you get into that vetting issue. How do you get someone a new pin? Generally, it costs because you're mailing that out to folks. There's a cost incurred there. And HR could not use Social Security number any longer because of privacy issues. So they couldn't vet you based on your Social Security number. They weren't allowed to ask it. So that's where privacy kind of knocks you a little bit for a loop. And the bottom line was users were all expected to know their corporate EID. So the goals of this were to provide seamless integration and single sign-on from a corporate web portal to an offsite benefits provider. So it really looked like a corporate website. No one even knew that they were going offsite. They had no idea. All the requests were proxied on the back end. Limit the sharing of company identities with the service provider. Due to privacy and due to concerns, they only wanted to assert certain attributes to this provider. And I'll show you how that was done. And then route all traffic using the corporate extranet portal and use strong authentication for all web services connections. So they wanted some pretty advanced requirements on the back end. They used an IDM, what you'll hear in the industry called an entitlement service. It's things about you that I can gain from a central repository and share with other applications. It's really what entitlements get you to. Retrieve the relevant directory attribute and pass the information to the benefits customer relationship application. They had a unique identifier. They said, we don't care how you authenticate people. We're going to use this number. And you will find that more often than not in the industry that they'll inevitably want to use their own identity. That's where federation becomes very valuable, because you're matching your identity with theirs in some meaningful fashion. They wanted to manage the URL customization, and they wanted to proxy controlled access and controlled session state. They wanted to make sure that people weren't hijacking sessions. I had to stretch this model a little bit, but you initiate the request. The reverse proxy logs you on. Hope you can see that. You basically go ahead and start the policy process. So it determined that benefits UID, the universal identifier, is needed for logon to the benefits app through entitlements rule set. So you plug in a set of rules into your policy server that said, when you're going to this URL, instead of passing, in my case, D. Carroll, pass my benefits number. In this case, it was a PeopleSoft ID. So take that out of the directory, do a quick lookup, and it would do things like cache that if you were a frequent user. I mean, all the wonderful things web technology can do. And it would send that EID to the back end. So a user never even, and most users that I encountered never even knew their PeopleSoft ID. They knew that they could get to this application specifically through their user ID, had no idea that they had a PeopleSoft ID. And so it goes through the back. It goes from the directory and picks up the attribute, tells the proxy to set the UID and the HTTP underscore user attribute, which is the standard web logon. You're connected via the back end with a mutually authenticated SSL session. So both machines are asserting an identity to each other to make sure that over the internet they know who they are talking to, using SSL to do that. The web server authenticates user as as their UID in this case. And the application retrieves the data. And so you're basically doing a reverse proxy web access management model. This is also a federation model, although a very primitive one. The latest thing I've been playing with is government personal identity verification. And there is a Homeland Security. I actually support Homeland Security in my role at MITRE. I work for the InfoSec Center, and I work for the Chief Information Security Office. So we have part of the charge on. I've been told by my sponsor that I have a particularly arcane set of skills in PKI and identity management, so they put me on this. And HSPD 12 is really about common identity credential for all government agencies. They want to provide consistent information for visual identification and reduce the threat of terrorist access to facilities, services, and systems. And that includes things like you might not expect, like trains and power stations and water supply facilities and docks and all kinds of stuff. And they want to enable emergency response across agencies. Define a common readable format, ensure mandatory attributes are present, and provide safeguards against forgery. Is anybody taking a look at FIPS 201? The audience? It might be interesting if you take a read on that. It covers a lot of what I've talked about, and they actually put a lot of operational use to it in FIPS. The logical access goals enable strong authentication. A lot of the government policies that I'm starting to see are going to require that second factor of authentication. And then the question becomes for folks like the U.S. Secret Service, for instance, how do you actually protect the biometric data that's on the card? How do you protect that second factor, and how do you get it? How do you keep it, and where does it go once it's being processed? Very important to law enforcement folks as well as military. Secure storage of biometric data, allow interoperability of credentials, and ultimately support information sharing, eGov and e-authentication, and everything you hear about DHS. Why did DHS come into being? It's information sharing. And so anytime you say that and you attach it to a project, it's generally a good thing. Allow use of common methods across federal agencies. The physical access goals provide storage and processing for authentication to electronically controlled barriers, entry doors, turnstiles. I was out in the RSA conference, and I was asking the vendors, the door vendors like Lenel, how are you going to know if someone's revoked when you don't have a door that's connected to a network? How is that going to happen? And they're actually talking about strategies to poison, send a certificate revocation list on the person ahead of you, so you poison the door for them. I'm still trying to figure that out. When I listened to them, I only got to listen to them for about 15 minutes, but I was like, that could be dangerous. That could be really dangerous. Somebody just take my card, take my hand, whatever they want to do, that type of thing. If they know that that's the way, I don't know how they're going to do it. I think it's an interesting problem that you may want to look into and try to solve. Serve a common card format. I'm going to show that, and reduce the number of separate credentials for physical access. I went to a federal agency the other week, and I've been telling folks this today. I obviously had an identity crisis because I went into the federal agency, walked in, and if you've been on a federal facility lately, you go through a lot to walk in the door. It makes the airports look kind of simple. Walked in, and I said, okay, I've got a DHS ID. They went, we don't accept that. This is a federal agency. I want to have a DOD ID. No. I have a West Virginia driver's license. Okay. And I went, all right, you're not connected to that state in any way, but whatever, and so I got in, and it's interesting. And in the same talk, they were talking about how the states don't trust the federal government for certain identity and credentialing, like a universal ID, but it's ironic that the government trusts the states. Worked for me. I got in the door, I got to go to my meeting. Okay. Standard PIV card format, which has a lot of zones, but basically this is what the card looks like. It's got an agency, a photo, and there's a lot of requirements around that. The overview. The identity management and card management is up there in the corner, and that is really where the focus of this information is. That you have a directory server, a lot of the things that you'll encounter in IDM technologies. Identity and attribute storage, which is the key management services, the vetting and user identification, the workflow. This system is probably the largest scale use of IDM technologies that I've seen to date, because it is going to be universal across a very large population. The federal government, it's not going to be trivial, and it's got a whole process to manage these cards. And GSA is looking into it. A lot of these organizations are looking into how they're going to source that, where they're going to put it, because these are huge systems. Card management subsystems, they're looking into how to do that. You can see the vetting and issuance. They have a identity card issuance station. One of the things they're doing with that is they're saying, I'm going to send the card to you, I'm going to FedEx it to you, but it will not be active until you walk in and someone with biometric access says you're authorized. They have to do a face-to-face check, and then they're going to flip an attribute on your card that allows it to be valid. So it's kind of like your credit cards. You call up and say, hi, I got my card in the mail, and they do that via your telephone number. Vetting, again, this